If you want good tax policy, it's utterly untenable unless you also believe in good spending policy. You have to control the growth of government. And as I've looked at this issue over the decades, I've come up with what I think is a very good fiscal rule in terms of determining whether a country's on the right track or wrong track. If government is growing faster than the private sector, that's a recipe for long run fiscal problems. And that's, of course, exactly what's happening in the United States. But if you can somehow control government spending so that the private sector is growing faster than the government, then you're in great shape, or at least over time, you'll be in great shape because what is the private sector? The private sector is your tax base. So if your tax base, the amount of jobs, the amount of income people are earning, the amount of profits your small businesses and big companies are earning, if all these things are going well, your economy's prospering and people are getting more income and businesses are getting more income every year, the government's going to wind up collecting its slice of that. I mean, I want it to be a small slice, but tax revenue normally will grow, and especially it will grow if your economy's prosperous. So if you want to make progress in terms of fiscal policy, simply have government grow at a slower rate than the private sector. Now, this is an opportunity to make one thing very clear. The number one goal we should have in fiscal policy is not balancing the budget. I mean, it's good to balance the budget, and there's nothing wrong with it. In the long run, it's the responsible thing to do. But the number one variable that we should be looking at is what is government spending as a share of GDP? Because whether you finance government by taxing resources out of the private sector, borrowing resources out of the private sector, or just printing money at the central bank, it's government spending is the problem in our country. Government is too big. Uncle Sam is consuming too many of our nation's resources. Too much money is being diverted in these three different ways from the productive sector of the economy to the government. We have to control government spending. And if we control government spending, the track record is very, very clear. That's how you get to a balanced budget. But even more importantly, that's how you have smaller government as a share of GDP. And that's how you leave more resources in the productive sector of the economy and you have faster economic growth. What worries me is that some of our friends, they put the cart before the horse. They focus on balancing the budget. But when that's your entire focus, guess what? Then the crazy people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris, they say, oh, yeah, I agree with you. We should balance the budget. So will you go along with these 10 tax increases that I have in mind? And of course, when you raise taxes, you're shrinking the economy relative to where it would have been. You're feeding the beast in terms of removing any sense of fiscal discipline in Washington whenever they think that they're going to wind up collecting more money, which is, by the way, one of the reasons in my speeches all the time, I showed the example of Europe, where over the last 50, 60 years, the tax burden has grown enormously by about 15 percentage points of GDP. And yet, has government debt come down during those decades? No, it's doubled because when you don't cure an alcoholic by giving him more to drink. You don't cure politicians of overspending by giving them more revenue. We have to control government spending. That should be the number one goal. And that's what my Mitchell's Golden Rule is all about. The private sector should grow faster than the government.